you don't know anything other than fitness. And that's crazy.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today's guest is a resilient leader who we first interviewed back in June, right in the middle of the first lockdown. As the world continues to grapple with the effects of a global pandemic, one that's been more arduous and lengthier than anyone could have imagined, we caught up with Mr. Martin Siebold, the CEO of the LifeFit Group. We'll learn about why he returned to Germany, how he's guided the Life Fitness Group and its brands through these uncertain times, what he anticipates success to look like for the post-COVID future, and his perspective on developing a recovery playbook that serves as a solid foundation for businesses to thrive in the long term. An optimist by nature, he has creatively learned to adapt, innovate, and discover new concepts and strategies to persevere in the face of challenges. So please welcome one of the industry's most resilient and successful leaders, Mr. Martin Siebold, to the Escape Your Limits podcast.
So thanks again for coming back on the podcast. We covered some ground last time, but it's in such a short space of time, things have changed again quite dramatically. So I'm glad to see you still smiling.
Yeah, well, it has been an incredible time over the summer, and I think we don't want to revisit that in 2021. But there's a lot of big lessons we learned this year, particularly around our customers, particularly around the way we treat them and what we can expect from them and what we have to deliver. So I think it has been an invaluable time. When we look back in 10 years' time, of course, crises like this, they don't feel like I'm going to sit back and look back 10 years' time. They obviously feel very intense. But if you have a great team around yourself, which I'm lucky to have, then you can manage these kind of crises.
On a personal level, it's one of the things I've been talking about with some people recently. And how have you been able to sort of, I guess, that statement you made about, looking back in 10 years' time and probably hopefully laughing about this, but have you been able to kind of keep yourself, on that helicopter level, looking down on it without allowing it to consume you too much and thinking about this is going to be like this forever?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of tragic. So we're not going to laugh about all these, lots of people, infected dead and all this, but there is lots of big learnings. And I think as a leader of a business, you have to almost force yourself to step out of it. So in a way, every 4 weeks, I clear my calendar. So already in April, I just said, okay, for a week, I'm not going to have any appointments. I'm not going to have any phone calls. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to make sure I can handle all the craziness, but in addition, I can actually sit down and think, because it won't be our last lockdown. This will come again. So someone has to think about what's going to happen in autumn, which we are now in. I now need to sit down and think. So this is my week, Thursday of the week, where I'm like, have no phone calls, nothing. And I'm thinking about March and April. And I think that's what you have to force yourself. And that, for me, it worked to clear my diary.
Yeah, one of the things that you spoke about on the last podcast, which actually was a pretty accurate prediction, I think it was the first lockdown. At the time, Germany had managed to escape a lot of this. They were doing pretty well, and I think you used the term, it's not the first wave. It's almost like a set of waves that would continue, and that certainly seems to be the case. So what is happening now in your market? Then it's from the news I've read. Everything's on lockdown now. Is that affecting you differently before? Is it more of a serious lockdown, and has that had more consequences on your various businesses?
In general, the German people are still German, so they oblige to rules. They wear their masks. They keep their distance, and being Germans, they remind you if you don't. So if you're out in the streets and if you're about, then people look after themselves and they look after others to kind of do that. I think that helps us, that kind of personality in the society. Hence, the lockdown we are in is a light lockdown. All retail is open. It's basically what the government considers leisure, which is now closed in order to get down with the infection opportunities, any kind of celebrations, any kind of theaters, any kind of restaurants. And unfortunately, they consider the health club industry also a leisure. So that's why we are also closed for the last 3 weeks.
With you've obviously been a resident in the United Kingdom, so you've probably seen a lot of the politics that have happened there. And I think, are you back in Germany now? Have you moved? Or
Well, you well remembered. Yes, I've made the decision that if I lead a business in Germany with our 80 plus locations, then I better be in Germany. So I actually moved 4 weeks ago back to
right?
Germany, but I did not move to where the head office is because I wanted to make sure that I'm not ending up in there because that's again not my role as a leader. My leader is not to be in the office. My role is to be out there with the people, with our partners, and to really be visible. And I
Hmm.
think by moving away from the office, that was a quite a bold move. People kind of felt a bit, whoa, what's he doing? Again, something new, but it guarantees myself that I will spend time with the teams in the field.
Mm. So how have you seen then the differences between the UK government managing this and the German government? You know, is there, are you seeing any sort of positives and negatives? Are there any things that they've done as it specifically relates to the fitness sector that you think is better in one country than the other?
Well, I guess I first have look always at the leader. So I looked at the two politicians, Boris and Ms. Merkel, and fortunately, they're both similarly unfit. Yeah. So if I look into countries where the government is actually fitter, there's almost a correlation sometimes that they kind of treat that industry different, which is quite interesting.
Mm.
So unfortunately, I think the government in Germany, because of also society, how they react to the crisis, and their willingness to adhere to the rules, is in general easier to manage us through this crisis. In the UK, there's a lot of things which is like not clear. They have so many big words, but there's no action behind it. And I think particularly also with Brexit, the UK is in a really difficult situation. They're facing now two major crises, one which COVID will give us, unemployment and all the job losses and all the industries which are at struggle. And then at the same time, they're exiting the EU, which is
Hmm.
in a normal world, it's not an easy feast. So I think when I look at how they treat the industry, it seems to be that in the UK, they have managed a better talking to the government. So the organizations there have had, and the big players have been in talks with the politicians, unfortunately, with the same result. In Germany, we have 5 or 6 federations, and they can't make their mind up and they can't align themselves, which is a big learning. And there's mixed messages, so it's very, very difficult for the government to understand what the industry actually wants. So I
Hmm.
think we as an industry in Germany have failed that. And I think the UK and the people there are doing a really tremendous job in actually showing the government what we can do. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, with the same results.
Mm. Yeah, I was speaking to Humphrey a few weeks ago from
Yeah.
Pure Gym, and he was talking about how they'd got a lot of these politicians in the gyms because most of them hadn't been in gyms for years and didn't even know what was going on. So he mentioned that there was a big disconnect and it really helped to walk them through and realize actually these are great facilities, they're clean. And it should be more important. I guess, unfortunately, it didn't affect the result of the lockdowns. But what's your thoughts? I guess you obviously from a business perspective, you're incentivized for the gyms to be open. But just putting that aside for a moment, how do you view gyms as being essential through this time? Do you think it's right that they should be closed down because they're and I know you got to be careful. You got so I don't want to sort of get you to say something that's going to upset your investors or whatever. But do you think that it's right? Like the governments have got it right. They should be locking down gyms. They are potentially going to be spreading this stuff. Or do you think that like is happening in certain states in America, where some of these gyms have been able to, like in Chicago, for example, with Midtown, they've been able to sort of class themselves as essential services, almost on the border of being medical, which I would sort of agree with in some respects. Do you think the governments have got it wrong and that they should really kind of be re-looking at this?
I think in general, it all comes down in a way to a local and regional level. I don't believe in the nationwide approach. And I understand that, when you look from America to Germany or to England, that it's almost like one state. So
Hmm.
so if we shut down, it's a whole state. But still, there are big cities. You have Berlin with over 3 million people, Hamburg with 2 million, Munich was 1.5, and then Frankfurt was 1.5. So there are clusters in, and I think the government in general should look at regional levels. And I think that's what they did at the beginning over summer when there were hotspots. And I think then they should really look at where are the infection levels. And they have the statistics. And our industry is very straightforward. You have the check-in of the member, the checkout, you know exactly who was there. No one is kind of giving you the wrong details and the wrong phone number and all this. So actually all the information is there, and then you have all the hygiene standards. I mean, there have been so much investment in higher cleaning focus, higher cleaning products, and then in distancing and putting the equipment aside, scheduling of the program timetable, making sure that you have air in the gyms and all this. I think when I look at that, I mean, it is almost like a hospital ward. That's how clean it is,
Hmm.
and it's almost kind of you look around and you go, okay, I really got to be really strange and stupid to kind of infect myself here. Because the next thing is then you go out, drive your car, go to the petrol station, you know, put petrol in your car, and I'm not sure everybody is wiping their hands before they touch their nose again. And that infection level is pretty obvious. So there is
Hmm.
so many touch points in our society which is obvious that you can, and no one will be able to trace you down. So we believe it's a major mistake that what they're doing, and we have actually put in legal action in order to do so. And we were the first chain with Fitness First in Germany, actually a single club who won a legal lawsuit 4 days ago, and that we actually should be allowed to open. Unfortunately, the city then dragged in, put their heels in, and today came a nationwide new law that allows the cities to do these things. So now it got rejected. So we were kind of for 4 or 5 days in the limbo, and there was a lot of hope in the industry that we would succeed. So we were quite in the spotlight, a lot of media interest, lots of people asking
Hmm.
us, all right, why did you do that? And I think we got a lot of um, things steered up, which would help us if we go into the next ripple of waves in spring, because that will come,
Hmm.
infection levels will go up in January, February again. So hopefully that we then can move the industry outside that color code what you have in the US or any kind of tiering system, that we remain open like retail does at this moment in time. That's the big hope. And interestingly, the judge who said you can open was a member of Fitness First. So when that's what you said. When you said earlier, people are not in the gyms. So
Hmm.
I think that's for us a big learning. We got to get the decision makers into our facilities.
Yeah, this is something that I looked at when I was sort of doing some research yesterday, and there was a news article, and nowadays I have to sort of even question whose news articles are kind of leaning to one side or another. But it did say that COVID's now the third biggest killer. Above that, I think one of them was Alzheimer's, and I believe the number one was still heart disease, of which a majority of heart disease is lifestyle related. And so there's like not to play down anything about COVID and the seriousness of it and how it affects people and all those things. But there's two things that kind of seem to be removed from from the way they're looking at it. One, obviously, it's destroying a lot of business, but I guess that's one consequence. But the other one is the the people's health and the consequences of that. And I guess the way it's been explained in all markets, I follow the news in Europe and UK and America, is look, we just cannot cope with this hitting our sort of health service. We just don't have enough beds, we don't have enough workers, and the real it seems as though it's explained that the real pressure is on the health workers. And then obviously sort of down the road you've got heart disease, which is probably, a lot of the beds are being taken with people that are voluntarily, eating bad foods or not exercising and creating this. And so, the bit that's sort of strange is this sort of, from my side, I'm trying to sort of understand why there's sort of not more appreciation to say, well, look, if people are, if people are fairly healthy, they're, because there's no doubt being locked up in your house without getting sunlight, without moving, being under pressure, under stress, being forced to sort of drink and eat and not move is not good for you, and certainly if you happen to go out in the petrol station and your immunity is low because of all those reasons, then you're more likely to pick something up than someone who probably is healthy and eating well and active and getting sunlight. Why do you think that? Is it just ignorance that they don't realize that the preventative benefits of, even if they said to gyms, okay, well, look, we've got to manage the people that are doing this on the private side, so balance the business element, so we're not specialized, we're not kind of giving them extra special treatment, but whether it's through local authorities or anything, just getting people to move and prepare themselves to deal with this, you would think it's really obvious, wouldn't you?
Well, first and foremost, you should, you have very two old candidates who ask in the UK, in America to become president, whether, you now have a really old one. So you should apply to do this, because I think you got my vote and a lot of people from the industry, so go for that, Messi, so you will vote. I make sure my team will vote. So that sounded really good. But joking aside, look, I think, and this is already one of the big mistakes I've learned over the years I've made. We have been living in a real self-created bubble of self-appreciation, and we have a great product. And the worst thing about the product is that people come to our gyms by car and they complain that the car parks too far away from the door, from the entrance. They actually don't want to walk up the escalator. The staircase, they want an escalator, and actually some gyms have, so I think we've created this bubble for ourselves that we believe that 20% or 23% of society who are in gyms, that is the society. And we completely ignored the 77, 75% of society who don't want to have anything to do with the gym. And it's a bit like, I'm not very musical. So I was a kid and I had my piano lessons, but it wasn't for me. And if you now come and drag me into, a concert, I would go, ooh, And unfortunately, the majority of our society has not bought into our industry. So that's the one thing we have to change. And then we have to think about, why is that? Because clearly the product is pretty obvious. But maybe eating vegan is also, the right thing. Maybe there's a lot of theories out there. So why are we not doing all of these? It's all to do with habits. How have we been educated? What have our parents told us? How is, school, university, and all this? And when you look at that, then we have to have a responsibility now to actually go into in these areas and make the changes there, in order for the next generation in 15, 20 years, that they have a target market of 40% or 60% of society. Because clearly, if we don't do that, then the healthcare cost and everything related to that will be anyway too massive that any society can keep that. And I think there are some areas in the world who have managed to do that. Why has Sweden 26% of the population in a health club member gym, whereas Germany has 12%? Clearly, the government there is supporting that with their insurances, and all this. So South Africa is another one. So I think there are parts in the world, but the main big societies, they failed that kind of task.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the, I was listening to some of the Davos interviews on YouTube recently, and it's been in the news a bit, I guess. And there's a lot, the green agenda and how important it is for future generations, which I absolutely agree with. I think it's really important that we play our part on that. But you also think that this sort of global health crisis, like even whether it's Asia, where generally you didn't see a lot of sort of obesity until recently, but the food changes, people's habit change, and there also seems to be this sort of global health crisis that that doesn't get, for whatever reason, maybe it's because there's so much money in pharmaceuticals of just, feeding, that maybe there's a lot more lobbyists in that side of things than there is in just getting people healthy. But you'd have thought for productivity, for so many different reasons, for kids, for adults, for older people are living longer, that the global health agenda, as well as the green agenda, should be something. And maybe we just got the kind of wrong people leading some of these countries that are going to do something about it. But it just seemed, for me, maybe because we look at this stuff all the time, but it just seems so obvious. And yet everybody I speak to, we had loads of conversations on the podcast. Nobody really sort of knows the right way to tackle it. A lot of people said, well, look, we need to get together as an industry. We need to stand up. We need leaders. But and I know there's pockets of things going on, but it just seems as though it's at a relatively low level, and it doesn't seem to be at the level where, like, right, okay, who do we need to get around the table? Who are these people, and who on the sort of health and wellness side, and then on the politician side, and how do you get these debates going? And how do you do something? It kind of frustrates me, and I don't know whether with your connections you've ever seen how something like that could actually be pulled off.
But Matthew, you have kids, yeah. So
yeah.
if they're my oldest one turned 18 earlier this year, yeah, and I will not be able to change him now. There is no chance. He has his personality, he has his will, he has his dedication, he has his drive, he has his concept of the world in mind. I had a chance to do that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 18 years ago. And and you can tell when you look at the kids from others. And it's the same now. We are going now to the politicians who are at the moment acting, and who are like 50 plus, and they're already in the positions. We're not going to be able to convince them. I think we need to really start much earlier. We need to go into the schools, and we need to go into that level, because the habits we create there, it's staggering. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of young people now going into the industry with Instagram. Do I look good, and I want some muscles and a bum and all that? But on the other hand, there's so much inactivity. So it's quite scary to see when you look at that school, and I think that's what we need to look at. We need to really look at programs to invest in the young people, that in 10 years time, 15 years time, it's no question that you're going to be active, and 40% of the population are. I think otherwise you will never convince an 18-year-old, and you will never convince a 55-year-old politician. God forbid a 75-year-old.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that even over here, where I thought that would be a little bit more important, is that there's very little external activity, and in fact through COVID, they've obviously banned that because it's dangerous for those types of activities to happen as well. So it seems as though even at that young level, the sort of the habits are not being created. So, well, look, I guess we're not going to solve that part of it here. But if you ever have any ideas about how we could go and take that on, or if we can kind of get an army together that could, knock on a few doors, then it seems as like, just as the green agenda is something that everybody's talking about. The global health agenda should probably be up there as well, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we have actually asked people who are not our members to kind of go, what would it take to actually come in? And we did that over summer, because we just thought, okay, how are we going to get this, more people interested? Like you said, green agenda, fitness agenda. And it was interesting, because how do we market? I mean, how does the fitness industry market? Offers, benefits, and all that. That wasn't on their agenda. We had one little line in there, which came in from someone of the team, who said, we're part of the solution for COVID, not part of the problem. That resonated with more people. I think it got a 67 or 70% resonation with, but we had Immune Buster, and Get Ready for Summer, and say, we had all these. But that didn't resonate. That had like 20%. But that little thing, be part of the solution for COVID, suddenly changed everything. So we put that in some of our newsletters. and in our marketing and the opening rate. We had a double opening rate for our newsletter. It's not bad anyway, 37%, but we had
Wow.
over 70% opening rate on the latest newsletter. So
And what
it's
was that?
little
What
things.
was the title you put in there? What did you put in on that?
Well, we put in there, fitness is part, or fitness first is part of the COVID problem. It's part of the solution to solve COVID, not the problem. And that's what made the people do that. And we did the same for Gym and for Smilex and all these kind of brands we run. So I think we need to really think about the messaging. And again, we need to put ourselves, what is the problems in the society? What are the questions they have? Not as what we want to solve. What does they need solving? And I think that gives us some good indications how we should communicate going forward.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We're looking at the 20% or whatever that small number is. There's a big percentage of people that just wouldn't even step foot in here. I read prior to this that you've got a brand. I'm not sure where it is, but is it that focuses on the people who don't like gyms? Is it Gym Society? Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's perfect. Well done. Yeah, our Dutch friend Frank, he runs that he created that concept, and it's basically a gym for gym haters and coffee lovers. Yeah, so it always has the best coffee in town, better than Starbucks, better than any, and it gives you a little picture of yourself onto the foam, if you want so, or like a motivational statement. So a lot of razzmatazz. There's no cardio. It's basically an electronic circle, but the gym is only a quarter of the actual size of the facility. So it's a very small training facility with 11 machines, uh, electric, and 3 stretch machines, also electric, and they have a lot of space for a lounge. So there's a lot of networking, and then there's some changing rooms, but no showers, no sweating in the whole gym, and it's incredible. It's basically personal training, because there are 2 trainers always on the gym floor, and you really drag the people in. So what we usually do is when we go to a big corporate, so we put one of them opened in Germany in the Corona summer, and I put it next to Fitness First, which is a multi facility gym with a pool, with wellness, with everything razzmatazz you can have. And we put them next to each other. And when we go to a corporate and we say, okay, who is interested in a gym, wants to work out, and usually 10, 15% say we're interested. So okay, fine, we got Fitness First for you. For all the 85%, you get a free week at the Gym Society. And the rate what people stay and do that is staggering. It's really cool to see. It's just, again, it's not, we call it the red and the blue ocean. We're targeting the ones who are not the normal customer of the fitness industry. So it's just one way to see, can we extend the 20% into 40%?
And what's the philosophy behind that? Trying to get people just taking small steps to just generally kind of have more of a fitness mindset, so maybe they could sort of progress into something else. Is that generally that kind of baby step introduction into it, that gateway into fitness? Is it?
I'm surprised. I thought so, but it's been running for 3 years now in Holland,
All right.
and they have kept the retention is 80% plus. So the people are. I thought this is a step. You go in, you make yourself fit, and then you join the real gym. But it's not the case. Those people, they don't want to join a gym. They are literally. It's a bit like people who do yoga, or do barre, or do Pilates, or even do like all these boutique special. I'm not sure you're gonna ever get them into a gym. That's why the market has increased. The low costers gave us a big increase in the market, and the boutique studios. So we are targeting. It's a bit like in the restaurant industries. I mean, when I was younger, there was a McDonald's, and then there was a steak restaurant, and there was an Italian place and a Turkish place. That was the 4 restaurants we had in the city. But now you have like 15 different offerings, and I think that's the same in the fitness industry. But by only extending the offerings, that's how you're going to grow the market.
Mm. And where are you price positioning of that then? Is it in like the sort of budget type of box, mid-market? Where is that? You know, what's the sort of cost to get involved in that with personal training?
Now it's almost double the cost of a club with a swimming pool and sauna and wellness and all that. So
Wow.
yeah, so you're over the €100 marks because look, this is a different product. You actually shouldn't price it too close to a fitness product because it isn't, and that's the kind of new thinking we got to do as an industry. And I'm not saying this is going to be, the biggest invention in the world. What I'm saying is we got to do new strategic activities that people engage into our industry. And Peloton is a brilliant example for us. It's widening the market. You have so many other great products out there. And but we know from the members and from a lot of people that they say, look, this is all great at home. Same with working at home. But I personally go nuts working at home. 5 days a week. And my family, oh, poor family. I mean, they lock me up here under the roof, so I'm away. But maybe in future it's going to be Mondays at home and Fridays at home and 3 days in the office or on the road. So there will be changes in our work and habits, but you still want to go to the office. And that's the same thing with the gym. Everything will become more hybrid. There's no question, but it already has happened. People who now say things will be more hybrid, they have been. Nike Training app has been out there for 5 years. I've been using it for 5 years. It's a brilliant app, and there's so many others, your Polar and your cycling and all these things. So it already has happened. It's just now accelerated everything. But the good news is people really want the human interaction. That's very, very clear. So when we came out of the first lockdown, we have had, after 3.5, 4 weeks, we've had more visitors than the previous year, every single week, despite having 10 to 15% less members. So the members who are now with us and the members who are now with us as a business, they are more dedicated than ever to train. And that's why we didn't see a big spike in any kind of reject levels or any kind of big massive spikes in cancellations in the second lockdown, because we already lost over summer all the people. Maybe the 20% real non-users, we have already lost them. I've 18 to 20% less members, and it's a massive problem. But now going into the second lockdown, bear in mind Germany still takes a direct debit.
Right. Right. So you've not had to cancel, you've not had to stop charging then?
No, we sent an email out and said, look, this is what we can do. You have the option to give it us, to support us. You can bring friends, double the time, plus some personal training session, or you take a freeze. And we have 17% taking a freeze and around 7-8% taking the other option, 25%. So ultimately, we've kept 75% of the revenue, and we've asked the members and surveyed, and they are fine. Strangely, maybe they're Germans, but somehow, in a way, it is working. We've been upfront. There's a lot of operators who don't charge in Germany, despite legally allowed. But they've actually had more problems than we had, because the member is a funny person. They come in with an Excel spreadsheet. I've witnessed it myself and go, look, I've been 17% in the swimming pool. I can't use that. I don't want to pay for that. I've been 11% using the sauna and so on. So I only want to pay 32% of my membership going forward. Honestly, it happened. I've seen it 2 or 3 times physically happening in other chains. So we're not going there. So that's really what we see in 10 years' time. But it's certainly an incredible, intense time at this moment in time.
And I would agree with you. I've certainly, when it happened, I kitted out my place. Obviously it's easy for me to get hold of equipment, and so I've got a great place to train. But I just, for me, although I now need to do a few days at home, for me, going back to, there's a gym locally now that I've been able to go to. It's just something about going in there and having that buzz, even though I kind of work out pretty much on my own. Just going, seeing people, having a chat in the changing rooms, in the steam and all that kind of stuff. I just, that's just an important part of me, just escaping from, not that I want to escape from my family, but you just kind of need that time off, and you're either in the office or at home, and it's just that sort of release really, and you come back and you're a different person almost. So I do think that's going to come back. The only thing that I've noticed, and I don't know what your thoughts are, do you think that the geographic location of new businesses may change to suit that? Because in a lot of markets, it's generally focused around the major cities and where people are working, and on the commute routes. But I guess with more people probably working from home a lot more, and probably they're not in a lot of these summer remote places, there's not as much facilities. Do you see there being more, or would you guys be opening more locations in some of those more rural type of areas where they're not that well serviced?
And again, I think this is a trend which has been happening, before. Look, for the last 3 or 4 years, you have seen very successfully regional chains around the metropolitan areas. So if you take Frankfurt, for example, big city in Germany, well known, and in the suburbs around Frankfurt, there are small regional chains who have built up small studios, 750 to 1,250 square meters. Yeah, so 10,000 square feet. And they've been building a network of gyms, relatively low in build out facilities and all this. And they've filled a gap because there were no major national chains. There is no Planet Fitness in those kind of suburban areas. And they've kind of filled this gap. And they are now the ones who are expanding fast. So we've bought a business 2 years ago called Smilex, and it's exactly that. And we bought it for that reason, because we did a market study. Where are the white spots in Germany? And there were 127 spots in Germany, A category, with you have no competition within 5 miles. And it's basically you just need to open up a gym and you're going to be successful. And that's why we bought that chain, in order to fill those gaps. So I think it's a trend again which has been there before and is now just accelerating. I still believe urbanization will continue. Like, yes, there is now a bit of work from home and all this, but let's look in 5 years' time, things will be normal again. And then there's so much people want to move into the cities. That I think in general, with all the culture and all the hype and the energy and all this, I think it will just be buzzing again. But there is a period of time where this will be different.
Yeah, you talked on the UK Active session you did. Sorry, Europe Active. You spoke about digital a little bit, and kind of almost said, well, look, don't base your financial strategy on making a lot of money from digital. Why did you say that? Was that just that you guys had gone down that road and sort of reassessed that, how that plays into your sort of product portfolio, and decided it's more of a support thing than a revenue generator? Or what's your sort of feelings on that, and why did you come up to that? How did you come up to that conclusion?
Yeah, there's this big smile from you, and then you still take the knife and put it in the wound and you steer it around, isn't it? Look, the reality is, having worked for Fitness First for over 20 years now, we have done some magic things, and we have, gone to a big chain around the world, and now we're in different regions again. But we've also made a lot of mistakes. And one of the mistakes was about 6 or 7 years ago, where we took on that we said we're going to develop a sophisticated app within the industry. We're going to, we're going to create a product which fits the members, and we're going to fund it all ourselves. And, it's a bit like, someone is going, he was always like doing the cooking and all this, and now suddenly saying, okay, but I can maybe also grow all the things, and get that cycle. It's just nothing to do with your core competence. So we spent millions into this, and we tanked it all, because ultimately the digital world is a world where only a few will really make money. And it has to do with development costs. It has to do with the offers are changing all the time, and in an instance, the players coming into the market. You don't know what in 2 years' time the big player will be who will run. Obviously, Apple now has come into our industry, so the whole model of maybe you have been able to charge members a little bit, and this Apple will completely flatten this. So we believe that that if you have to offer online and you have to offer an app and you have to offer all this, but you have to work with partners who are going to, give you the edge. So we will launch the next version of our app later this year, and we will integrate Les Mills as our key partner here because we believe that's a product you can monetize because the quality from that is so superior to any of the other products and will be at the same level of like the Pelotons and the Apples and others. But I still only believe it will be 3 or 4% of the membership base who will actually go into and pay a premium to get the full content from them. But if you start to create your own content and try to monetize that, been there, done that, better content outside the industry in YouTube and everywhere, and there's marvelous content out there. So I just think this is going to be really difficult, and we've burned our. I've also not spoken to anyone in the industry who has made it work. So whoever is listening and who's made it work, give me a buzz. We integrate it. I'm sure you get 10% of it.
So talking about mistakes, I like to just to sort of spend a little bit of time on this because I guess you hear webinars and podcasts and people talking about this pivot, and one of the things back at the beginning of the year was everybody was talking about digital. We need to get involved in digital. We need to get our app up and running. We need to create content, all these kind of things. And I suppose there's sort of two ways, two lines I wanted to go down. The first one is sort of the lessons that you've got, which you've just shared one now, which will probably save people a huge amount of money. But the sort of lessons you've got in terms of how you using the word pivot. I don't like that word, but I think everyone knows what I mean when I say it. But the being cautious about pivoting from your core business and going into other areas and your views on that. I guess it could all be diversification. I guess if your current business is struggling and you've not got any income, what are some of the lessons you've learned there? And then secondly, I think there's a lot of people out there that feel, I guess, or could feel as though they've personally failed, and not necessarily through actions that have been totally down to them, but the market's changed, the world's changed, and they're probably not in the position that they thought they would be. They're having to go back to the beginning, and they're trying to pick themselves up and probably beating themselves up mentally. So with those sort of two things, what are some of the lessons that you've learned from failure or making mistakes that would be useful for somebody that's probably going through a tough time at the moment?
Wow, it's a big question. And of course, the mind is spinning and when you have done a lot of good things, you've done equally a lot of bad things and learned a lot of things. I think in this time, a couple of things come to my mind. And I think it's important for leaders to look ahead. And when I was younger, and this is probably 15 years ago, I was looking at a gym chain at a single club operator at that stage in Regensburg in Germany. And it was called McFit. It was a low-cost operator. It's the equivalent to Planet Fitness in the US now in Germany. And I was looking at it and I'm going, wow, they have no showers. And if they have a shower, you have to pay for it. They have no staff. They have no real fit out. This is pretty basic. And I came back to our board and I said, look, guys, I think we got a problem because they are good product and they are cheap, and we should create, and it was called at that time Fitness Company in Germany, we should call it Fitness Company Light. A light version of us, and just do this. And I got completely hammered and got out of it. The story happened is that this is now the biggest operator in Germany, 1.5 million, and Rainer and his team have done an incredible job for the industry, for getting people into the market, and we have been ignorant, and we have been full of ourselves, and we have been not looking at what is the real next threat. And I think at the moment, we all know that we're in lockdown, and we all know that we need to look at cash, and we all know that we need to take care of our good staff, and we all know we need to treat our members fairly and all this. But what is actually the next threat? if I'm a president of the United States or any other, I should have listened to Gates because he said, that's going to be the next big thing. So what is out there in the world? What is the next big thing? Globally, that should others do, but in our industry, what is really going to be? Is it digital? Is it? And I think that was a major mistake. And combine that 6 or 7 years, 8 years later, I thought, all right, I envisaged that. Okay, we didn't do it, but I'm pretty good in that. And I got a new boss, and that boss was Andy Coslet, and he was the CEO of IHG, which is an international hotel group which has brands like Holiday Inn, Intercontinental. So he's like an absolute class A, CEO, which was probably at this stage, a bit big for fitness first, but we had big ambitions. And he sat me down after watching me for 6 weeks, and he said, Martin, you're talented, you have energy and all this, but you're failing your job. And I said, oh, this is great, Andy, thanks for coming along, and he said, yeah, look, you don't know anything other than fitness. And that's crazy, So have you been into a hotel and looked how they do service? Have you been into a retail, into a restaurant, how they do service? Have you actually done any of that? Have you ever looked outside your industry, or you're always in this and you master that and then you clap your hands and you go to industry convention? Don't go to an industry convention. Go to a convention from a different industry. So I said, okay, clearly, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I took a team and we went to New York, and then we flew to Orlando, and we looked at California. We went to Asia. So we did a round the world trip. We actually did that for 3 weeks. Because, one thing, when someone gives you such a critic, you need to really check it. He was up for it. So we did that trip. And it was mind blowing. It changed almost everything how I manage nowadays. It really opened my mind how the little things other industries do can shape what you do in your day-to-day business. And it was a real miracle. And at the same time, I also look at our industry again. Because, when you're in New York or when you're in the other big cities and you look at retail, hotels and all that, why don't you also look at other gyms? We saw 37 gyms in 3 days in New York, and we saw all of other things. And we really learned a hell lot about our industry. And again, and I can only encourage young people who are in this and who maybe just started, and the old ones who have been there always, use the time now to maybe digitally, because you can't travel, but engage in different kind of education outside the fitness industry. Look, how is the travel industry, how is the corporate travel leisure industry treating this massive crisis? How are airlines treating this? And I think that's something we as leaders have to really get into our heart. We gotta learn from people who don't do our job. And only then we can do a job. I think that's one of the big learnings throughout my career now, since I've been on this trip and been challenged. Okay, I understand that. Let's ask someone who is not a marketeer. Oh, hang on a second, we're asking about a marketing company. Yeah, I know that, but I want to hear the opinion of someone who's not a marketeer. So you can apply that same rule across all your work streams. And I'm in conference calls, and I can see my team is waiting for it. That they're presenting something, and then I go, all right, have you checked that with this person in the team, or have you asked your mother-in-law, what she's thinking about it? And I think that's something we miss as management, that we are not open enough. We're living in our own self-created bubble. We have the people around us who have taken over our opinion, and ultimately you pay them, so they're naturally going to put their flag into the wind you're going to blow. So that's something I would really encourage, and I've made lots of learnings out of that.
And you mentioned team a moment ago. How are your team dealing with this mentally? Like, I guess you've got a mixture of personal trainers and Group X people that are probably not able to do what they did before, and then maybe staff that have got family and they're concerned about being in contact with people. What's your assessment? How are your staff dealing with it mentally, and is this something you as a leader, is there any things that you're doing to sort of help give them that sort of mental support that probably a lot of people need at the moment?
Yeah, this is probably the trickiest thing for all of us at this moment in time, because I think you have two sides of the coin. Naturally, our number one job in a crisis is preserving cash. So you have all your costs, and people is a big cost. So in one way, you need to look at that and go, okay, who is going to be on the bus with me in 6 months' time? Who I can rely on? Because clearly, the size of the bus has gotten smaller. So you got to or you have to look at a different way. Who you're going to get into the business, who are maybe the same amount of people, but you are able to pay them less. Yeah. So we are working with a lot of education organizations to get real young people into the industry in order to kind of excel with us as a business and grow as a business. And they're naturally cheaper than some of the ones who have been around for a long time. But given that we are embarking into the biggest change for all of us, because ultimately it's about human interaction. And the reality is that if you're not preparing yourself now, that in 6 months' time, you cannot take staff with you in your teams who are not able to interact with people, and we all have them, then you're not serving your members, because that's what the members is clearly telling us. I either stay at home and do my exercise at home or outdoors, or I come into the gym, but then I want human interaction. And I think that we got to be ready for that. So you have the balance of cost, so you got to look at that. And at the same time, you need to engage them through this massive turbulent area now, but they are on like full on, so you can't even touch them because they're at home. So the way we have been doing this, we've kind of looked at holistically at what is a person made of. And I've mentioned that before, but it's a great example. We believe that people are like an airplane. So you have your pilot. So how is the pilot of our staff doing? What can I do for that? So we've given them, said, let's go for Blinkist. Great program. So you got some really good customized programs. So take up Blinkist. We'll support you there, and you're going to get some education here. We've got
What's that one, Martin?
Blinkist. It's it's an audio book. It summarizes audiobooks. So let's say you have the Napoleon Hill, How to Grow Rich, or you have all the other great books, and they basically do like a 5-minute summary of those books as an audio. And obviously, so you get lots of those. So it's a real good start of the day. We have worked with a meditation company, the biggest in Germany, 7 Mind, that our teams and our members get free access for 2 months. So we looked at the pilot. Yeah, how can help the pilot? We've obviously told them, look, the people know exactly who is coming back, who's not coming back. So we've made sure even the ones we want to separate, that they know we're going to separate from them, because that's better to know that you can't come back than when you have uncertainty and you go into Christmas season and then January you come back and suddenly someone tells you, that's not fair. So you got to be honest. The second part is the business side. So you've given a lot of learning and development tools within our programs that they can access from home, or we've given them other programs outside the normal fitness stuff, because we want that they educate themselves in various areas. Then you have the private one. So obviously we've supported them in a way, but that's the hardest one for an employee to support your teams. How are you going to support them? But we've made sure that they know all the government programs where they can get funding. So if you're a personal trainer, self-employed, group exercise instructor, so all these things but it's hard. It's a really one. And then obviously keeping the body off the plane, keeping fit. That's really important. So obviously, we kind of jokingly said, okay, when you come back, you're going to get new uniforms, but they're going to be a size smaller around the hip and a small bigger on the top, so just visually. But so we really said, okay, and we're keeping, we're using our app in order to show that everybody is logging their exercises and all this. But again, not everybody participates, but it's a real tricky one. That's the hardest thing at the moment, to keep the teams engaged and motivated and doing that. So a lot of communication, lots of thought gone into that. And some things we get right and some we fail.
Yeah. So just as we wrap up then, Martin, you guys have got a multi-brand strategy at different price points and levels and offerings. Now, we're probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 months on since we last spoke, and you gave your prediction then. How are you now seeing things in 2021? Are you sort of still of the same mind you was early on in the year? Do you see some of those models, based on the new information that you've got available to you? Do you see some of those models probably succeeding more than others? And if so, what's your kind of assessment for next year in terms of your business and the general market positions that will succeed in the fitness industry?
Yeah, I think I can predict that better than if I could predict the stock market. I'm probably bad there. I've made some really terrible decisions there, but in the fitness industry, I think what's going to happen is, unfortunately, I think the ones who are not really clearly defined who they are, and they're usually sitting in the middle market. So a boutique studio is pretty clear what they are. They have their passion and their dedication. Low cost is pretty clear what they are. And then there are all the ones in the middle who over the years have not really developed their branding, their mission, their vision for the members, for the staff. And I think we've seen a lot of those we will now go, will disappear. I actually believe, unfortunately, there will be 20 to 30%. So that's almost every third gym in that market segment will disappear. And that's tragic, and I think there is a big downside for the consumer, because a lot of facilities will go, so which means less competition. Ultimately, the ones who are picking it up, I think, will increase prices in the upper market segment over time, because you will have less members in the next 2 or 3 years, but you need to still pay your rent, your staff, all your costs. So you got to get more revenue from the existing member. And then low cost will accelerate, because it's just a place, where people which economically challenged, and there will be a lot going forward in the next 6 to 12 months, will keep themselves fit. So I believe overall the market will shrink for the moment, inside in amount of gyms, but also the amount of people participating, quite drastically. I think something like 10% or more. And I think it will take 2 or 3 years' time that we are at the same revenue levels than we are at the moment. And probably membership levels, I potentially think it's going to take even longer. As an overall market, there will be the winners. The LifeFit Group, with all their chains where we are positioned, we will clearly be one of the winners. And that's a great thing for us. But we got to be patient, and we got to wait for the right medicine and medical treatments and all this until this arrives. But there will be closures until just before Christmas. Then potentially there will be lifting some of the lockdowns. Then when the normal wave of colds are coming back and fevers in mid-January, probably we're going to go into another lockdown again for 4 to 6 weeks time. And I think then we should be through, because last time, that's actually, when you don't have the levels, we can get out of that. Medicals and medicine will be available. So there is a chance that we don't have to go again into lockdown, but there will be regional lockdowns. Some states, some cities, some high areas. So unfortunately, this will be a long ride. And I'm happy that our owners, private equity, is fully behind us, but this will be tough, very tough.
So I normally ask the same question at the end, but we went through that when we last spoke. So I thought, as a change, it would be good to leave on a bit of a positive. So I'm not taking away again the seriousness of what's happened at the moment, but what are some of the positives that we can take away, as your business as an industry from this COVID situation? Where is it going to leave us, or changes that have happened that wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't have been experiencing this pandemic?
I'm a firm believer that with the focus on health, which we are in a pandemic, so the whole focus on everybody is health, that ultimately this has accelerated the growth of the industry. There's no doubt that we would have been growing, and Ursa had great goals, 100 million and and other organizations. I think this will go faster once we are through this. I predict in 2 years time or so, it will really accelerate, and the whole notion of what you said earlier, and what I really can only echo, this is the right thing, that it will happen like this because the consumer will understand health better, because they've now heard a lot. I mean, everybody knows someone who has corona or has an illness or has to stay at home because of it. So it's everywhere. But also, I believe the industry will be better. I think we will have better people, we will have better products, because if one thing is clear, that industry has gone through many waves itself, challenges. And I think it always came out better afterwards. And I'm fully confident with all the great leaders I know around in the industry, and some of them I can call friends, that we will do that again, and we will do a better job for the next generations, because we're going to address that now with the schools and with everything, that the industry even get a better stand. So I'm full of confidence, but I also know it's going to take 2 or 3 years time.
So hang on, the future looks bright. You just need to sort of hang on in there, I guess. It's a message.
I think it is, but it's a good thing to look. And I think that's why I said earlier at the beginning, I see light at the end of the tunnel, and I didn't see that in March, because in March we didn't know anything about it. No. We didn't know anything. We didn't know how long. We thought, how many people will die. How will members react. We didn't know any of that. Now we know. And so ultimately, if you look ahead 1, 2, 3 years time, the future will be there, and it's a great industry. We have great products, great people, so we will succeed.
Fantastic, Martin. Thank you so much for your time today, this evening, and wish you success at navigating the next few months ahead of us. Thank you again.
Same to you, and it was a pleasure to be with you guys.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.